Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Winsight Live. Before we get to today's industry news, we have some of our own. We're pleased at Winsight Grocery to welcome Christine LaFave Grace as an editor. Christine will be covering Walmart, Target, and some Midwest retail for us. She joins the Winsight team from Putnam Publishing, where she was managing editor of Plant Services. Christine has more than 15 years of experience as an editor covering the food service, healthcare, and manufacturing industries, and she's looking forward to reintroducing herself to some of her former Technomic colleagues of our sister company. Phil?
Yeah, and it's great to have Christine here. In fact, right before we got on, we were talking about Restaurants and Institutions magazine, where she was, and how the whole food service thing changed. And then, when Pat joined us, Pat and Christine used to be, I don't want to say adversaries, but competing publications. And now we're on the same team. So it's great. So, Christine, welcome.
Thanks so much, Phil. Thrilled to be here.
So, John, you just read a really cool book and had a really cool interview. Tell us about it.
Yeah, interview was with Benjamin Lohr. Benjamin is an author who wrote a new book called The Secret Life of Groceries. This was a fascinating look into our industry, and one that's going to be a little bit difficult, I think, for some people to kind of take in. But his book begins with the premise that the supermarket is a kind of a wonderful place, and kind of seeing the work that goes into it can be difficult. And he tells this through a series of stories. One through, he spends some time on the road with a trucker driving goods from a warehouse to an Aldi warehouse, and gets into a discussion of the difficulties of the independent trucker that the industry, depends so much on. Spends time on a Thai shrimp boat and sees some of the worker issues there. The exploitation is just horrifying to read, and it's a wonderfully written book. In addition to that, it's funny. It's got a little bit of a dark edge to it. A fantastic interview with Joe Kaloum, the founder of Trader Joe's, which he kind of uses in the book as this idea that kind of non-orthodox thinking is the kind of thing that can help the industry recognize some of the problems, in society that are sort of boomerang effects, I guess, of this wonderful supermarket world that we all work and live in. A terrific book. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And my just telling you what's in it is not really the experience of reading it. Like I said, it's well written and really hard research, and a really thought-provoking work.
John, did you have an opportunity when you interviewed him? Obviously, we know how long it takes to get books out, and I'm sure it was well written before COVID-19 hit. Did he give you any indication of, as a result of COVID-19, any new insights that he would have on our industry?
Well, our conversation was mostly what was in his book. There's a part in the book in which he discusses one of the food entrepreneurs trying to get their products into grocery stores, and while discussing her product, which is a salsa, Phil, you may have heard of. I think it's been on what's that TV show? That
Shark Tank.
TV show, Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Mentioning that although she beat the odds and had a product that kind of met with this great desire for people to kind of express themselves through food, which is really the lifeblood of these new food shows, that the onset of COVID might have affected how well that product is actually going to do. So it's a tough field for people who are trying to make it in the food world too, for sure.
Hey,
COVID had to help.
yeah, it's very tough. I remember 20 years ago, Frank Sinatra introduced a spaghetti sauce, an Italian spaghetti sauce that was really good. And this is Frank Sinatra. And that lasted on the shelves maybe 3 months or 4 months. So if he can't do it, who can? Tell us about what Ahold did that's really kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, they bought a rival called FreshDirect. Here in New York, FreshDirect is an institution. It goes back some 20 years, established itself as an internet grocer, does a really good job with fresh food. I think they say 60% of their uh, items they sell are fresh food. They do all the processing themselves in their factory. So they roast the coffee beans, they prepare the steaks, so that kind of things. And the e-commerce has always worked for them better than in most places because of New York's density and their focus on the customer. And so it's a lot of people living in high rises. The idea is that deliveries are a little bit less uh, difficult to pull off profitably than some of the other companies. And it's been a long struggle for FreshDirect, which I think has something like $600 million worth of sales, but a terrific brand name. And so I spoke with Ahold Delhaize and said, is this a new solution for e-commerce? Because of course they've had Peapod for as long as FreshDirect has been alive. And they're not really seeing it as that. They're seeing it just like any of their, what they call at Ahold, great local brands. So the FreshDirect will be the great local brand for Ahold Delhaize, only based in New York City and e-commerce, whereas Stop and Shop will be Stop and Shop, and Giant will be Giant, and Hannaford will be Hannaford elsewhere. So that's their vision on that. Now, FreshDirect has long had these ambitions to kind of expand, and I think, without getting into the details, Ahold Delhaize's chief digital officer sort of hinted at the idea that this might be a little bit of maybe a high touch and upscale offering in some of those places where it might do compete with Ahold's Giant brand, for example, in Philadelphia or in Washington, where they have an integrated Peapod offering that they've had now for years and years, and already a pretty strong e-commerce business there. So maybe a little bit more high touch, a little bit higher quality, and probably a higher demographic customer is a possibility here. Although it may or may not go to market under the name FreshDirect in some of these other locales, other than Manhattan, the 5 boroughs where FreshDirect is real strong.
Well, and let's remember what happened at Jet.com that had the same strategy for Walmart, where they wanted to go to a higher level income. They wanted to have more curated products, all the above. So we have to watch FreshDirect carefully to make sure that Ahold doesn't make the same mistake. And if you look at shutting down Peapod in Chicago, where Christine and Jackson, live, that to me was a shock. I knew the Parkinson brothers really well. It got started in Chicago. Peapod Labs is still in Chicago. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, Phil, I mean, the one thing I'll say about that, Jet.com, one of the reasons it didn't succeed in New York, FreshDirect. They already had it there. And I'll say, well, where Peapod Digital Labs, it's in the same building as Winsight's headquarters there in Chicago.
Yeah. So Pat, you've got a new gift guide, restaurant guide. Tell us about it.
Right. Well, this was actually compiled by my editor-in-chief, Jonathan Mays, but I thought it was too good not to share. So, Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, and then comes Cyber Monday, and he put together all these restaurant-themed kinds of products and swag that you could buy for the holidays. And one of my favorites is Arby's turkey pillow. It's a pillow that you actually put over your head, and it's shaped like a fried turkey. And it's going to be a big seller, Arby's thinks. And something that already sold out. People love restaurant swag.
Yes.
Something that already sold out are Sonic's holiday socks. So you can no longer get a pair of holiday socks from Sonic.
I needed to jump on that one. I mean, come
Definitely.
on. I just in my office, on my office desk, I actually have a little statue, maybe about 6 or 7 inches high of Bob from Bob's Big Boy. So I'm there.
You might be able to sell that on eBay for the holidays.
No, I want it. But the turkey pillow thing, I mean, that to me is really strange. So let me get serious for a second. Here in Los Angeles, they actually now closed indoor and outdoor dining for the next 3 weeks. Do you see that as something that we're going to continue to see happen across the country, Pat? Or, is this an isolated instance?
Well, I think as COVID rates spike in different locales, different municipalities are taking different kinds of actions. And unfortunately, it's coming like right in the middle of the holiday season when it's typically the most lucrative time of year for restaurants. And closing them completely is really going to be, put another nail in the coffin. I mean, it's just been devastating for the industry. That's why I wanted to talk about something fun like the holiday gift guide.
Okay, I'm the downer. I get it.
No, it's a very valid point, though, and I really, a lot of restaurants were planning to pivot to outdoor events,
right,
because they couldn't hold indoor holiday parties, and now that's not even going to happen. So,
well, the other thing that's happened, at least in Santa Monica, is all the restaurants now have outdoor areas. They relined the streets. I've talked about that before. So over the past probably 6 weeks, now they said, okay, this is our future. They've invested a lot of money to now build, wood planking, not just have tables in the street or with artificial grass and stuff like that, but they're actually investing thousands and thousands of dollars. And there's probably 3 on the street that just started construction this past week, and now they're going to be shut down for 3 weeks. So that's got to really hurt as well.
It does. And even like in colder weather climates like New York, where they had to invest in heat lamps and, even more, permanent kinds of structures, it's really going to hurt them. I mean, hopefully a lot of the restaurant operators think these are going to be in place for the long term. They don't, see outdoor dining ending just when we get a COVID vaccine. They could see it ending into next year and the year after. So hopefully these are long-term investments that will pay off.
Yeah, hopefully for the industry. So Christine, you're going to give us your first story, which is, a Q&A. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really kind of a neat story, a fun interview to do, and kind of a good news note, kind of to end the year on. I had the chance to speak with Nick Carter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Wagon, which is an online farmers market. It kind of operates exactly as it sounds. You can go on there. They cover Midwest markets through major Midwest states. They're expanding out from the Midwest. You order directly from your local farms that you see at your local farmers markets. There's no subscription involved. It's not like when you buy a CSA share and you're kind of on the hook for 4 or 6 months.
Right. And you don't know what you're getting.
Right. Yeah. You're not going to end up with 8 bunches of kale this week and then, whatever next week. So it offers a lot of flexibility for consumers in terms of getting access to local producers. It also really expands access for the farmers and local vendors themselves, which is really interesting. Nick is a guy he's got a great family story. He grew up on a family farm in Indiana, and he saw how the agriculture market was changing, across the industry, across the country. They were growing tons of different, crops when he was, young kid. By the time he went off to college, they were down to corn and soy. And he said he describes himself as an entrepreneur at heart. He went off to school, dropped out of college, went to Indy, the big city of Indianapolis, to do tech there, founded successful startup venture. And then he says about 5 or 6 years ago, he kind of took stock and said, well, what do I really want to do? How can I really blend my interests? And his passion, he kind of went back to his roots with the family farm. He launched this business with another guy, who's Dan Brunner, who's a veteran of Kiva Systems, which Amazon bought in a big deal back in 2012. They put this together and, Wagon was born. They were in 6 markets at the beginning of this year. They're in 20 now, and he expects to be at 50 by the end of next year. All this through COVID. And it was just kind of a neat story. He says, not just from a farmer perspective, but even some of these vendors who would get their products in local restaurants or local smaller markets, if people aren't going to those this year because of COVID, if they've pulled back their visits completely, this gives them access still to those farmers. He says he's had people come into his office, small farmers, and say, "You saved our family farm this year." It was really a neat, kind of compelling story.
And also, it's a must-read story, no question about it. But also, let's not forget that the consumer, even before COVID, wanted to have more of a relationship with the farmer to begin with. How things are being grown, all of those kinds of aspects. So this makes perfect sense, and I love the idea. I'm jealous that I didn't think of it.
Right. Yeah. It's cool to find out about that. That was one of the things he pointed out too, is that, consumers are asking questions that they can't always get answers to from a local supermarket. Not only where did this food come from, where was it grown, but what was the environmental impact? And you got to think, if you're not asking it so much in one community, that's going to keep expanding out. And these questions that are, expanding because of people looking for different kinds of diets or looking for concerns about climate change, what it's doing in their community, you got to consider that it's only going to be a bigger market for for answering these questions. And as he points out too, there's such this demand for farmers markets for access to them. What happens if your kid has a soccer tournament on Saturday morning and you can't get there? That's a lost opportunity for you. It's a lost opportunity for the vendor. So this really, he says, just builds on, the great relationship that farmers are looking to establish with consumers at the markets, and it just takes it to another level.
So Jackson, I see the food world being run by two companies. One is Amazon, and then the other one is 7-Eleven. You have new news for us every week on 7-Eleven. Am I looking through that lens properly? Is 7-Eleven really going to become the powerhouse that I think it will?
Oh man, I mean, 7-Eleven is already a worldwide empire, and huge news from them again this week. We were just talking on Winsight Live a couple of weeks ago about lowering emissions, and 7-Eleven has promised to be essentially net zero emissions by 2050, which is following the trajectory of a lot of governments and other global businesses that have made similar announcements. Now, to be clear, this announcement is coming out of Seven & I Holdings, the parent company in Japan, not the American company, but we are going to see some effects of this announcement here in America. And Seven & I Holdings has pledged that by 2027, we are going to have 250 electric vehicle chargers here in the United States. And this is just one piece of a nearly $1 billion investment that they're going to make in bringing down emissions over the next 5 years. There is even talk about if they're having trouble reaching their goal by 2050, we could eventually see power plants that create clean energy run by 7-Eleven. I don't know a lot of details on that exactly, where those would be located, but and this would look different in Japan also. The stores in Japan are getting these low emission lamps. They'll be shuttling supplies with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which we in the States, we don't have the infrastructure to supply that kind of thing. But again, we're getting 250 EV chargers in the next 7 years, which is just huge.
It is, and good for them for taking the lead on that. It's certainly a powerhouse. I have certain issues with 7-Eleven, but I think if we look at their moves over the past 2 or 3 years, and also what I'm seeing them really clean up their stores, physically clean them up, which for me was a major problem for a long time. But I think that since the Japanese company took it over, and again, they've got a much more long-term strategy than we typically have here in the U.S. I think Amazon, 7-Eleven, they're going to own everything. So, Jen, should I head to Costco to do my Christmas shopping?
I'm going to try to do some of that tomorrow. Actually, brave Costco.
Now, don't spend too much. Don't spend too much on my gift. I just want to tell you that even if you just get me a little salami from Costco, that's fine.
Right. and I cut it up and share it with the big
With everybody
that you get at Costco. Yeah, so it was interesting. Last week Costco announced that it was issuing a special cash dividend of $10 per share on its stock to its stockholders, which amounted to like 4.4 billion in total. And then they also had a virtual event with Morgan Stanley, which Morgan Stanley was saying that, Costco is one of the, it's among the strongest retailers out there. And Richard Galanti, their CFO, spoke on the virtual event. And it was interesting to hear their journey through the pandemic, because in the beginning, Costco, like other specialty retailers, kind of missed out as everyone was so focused on the one-stop shop, being able to go, to Walmart and get everything that you need in one place. And so consumers were slower to embrace Costco, but once they did, sales just took off like they have in the rest of grocery. And Richard was saying that, there were some surprises. Like initially they were thinking like worst case scenario, like what if we don't sell any of this, patio furniture and outdoor stuff that we have, and then like come July, they were scrambling to keep this stuff in store because what happened was nobody was taking trips. No one was going out to eat. No one was doing anything. So they were improving their homes, so all those big ticket items flew out the door. Other things, bigger is better for Costco during a pandemic, because not only even when they put, purchase limits on stuff like meat, like if you're allowed to buy 3 packs of meat at Costco, that's 10 times what it would be at a traditional.
It's a half a cow. Yeah.
And then the stores themselves are bigger. So people maybe felt safer shopping there because, the ceilings are higher, the aisles are wider. And then he also talked about membership, which I thought was interesting because, initially they were thinking that Amazon, people who would choose one or the other, like they're not going to have multiple memberships. You're either going to do like an Amazon Prime membership or a Costco membership or another club membership. But that turned out to not, be the case. And Richard said, they're not mutually exclusive. We have a lot of the same shoppers with multiple memberships. And, another area where they did really well was with fresh food, because spoilage went down, which I think was the case for a lot of retailers, and labor productivity went up, which, the shrink in fresh can be a huge, loss. It can be, against your profits. So fresh food sales soared. And then with e-commerce, I thought that was interesting too. They are not trying to be, they don't want to compete with Amazon on e-commerce, and they're happy with it representing a smaller percent of their sales than other retailers. They're not even going after that model, with the exception of a few big ticket items and maybe like jewelry. They're not going to get into the click and collect game. So
yeah, I think that's probably smart. Can I share with you a quick Costco story?
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes back years ago. I'm doing a segment on Oprah, and we take 3 people from the audience, and we give them each $100, and we go with them to Costco to see what they could buy for $100. They all have these big, carts that are doing it. There was one woman I will never forget in my entire life, and then we've got some questions on Facebook that I'll get to as well. I'll never forget her face. I forgot her name. She was a Chicago policewoman, and she has her cart. We get back to the studio. We then put everything there, and she bought 100 rolls of toilet paper. So Oprah says to her, "Wow, that's a lot of toilet paper." And she said, "Look, I'm always going to use toilet paper. It was really cheap." And then I said to her, "Well, you must have a big garage." And she said, "No, I've got a studio apartment in Chicago." And the audience and Oprah, it was hysterical. So we still have that also when we look at Costco and Sam's Club, where this whole bigger is better thing going on, I think, still till this day. Let's talk about prices, Jen. COVID-19, recession, change of administration. Are we going to see any price wars this year?
According to Profitero, they just did their 4th annual price study, and they say, yeah, this holiday season is you're going to see a lot of price wars. They do a pretty comprehensive study. They take a look at over 18,000 products in like the top 21 categories, best-selling items, and then they compare that across all these leading retailers. And what they found this year is, not a huge surprise that Amazon is the low price leader, coming in at like almost 15% less than a lot of other, on average than other retailers. And they also pointed to research from McKinsey, which says that this year, 48% of shoppers, so roughly half, are going to be shopping based on price this holiday season. And one bit of surprise, this was surprising to me, maybe not to others, but I always feel like Target's reasonably priced compared to other places that I'm shopping. Mm-hmm. But they found that on food and beverage, Target was actually 20% more than Amazon on most items. Wow. With Walmart and Kroger also, rounding out the top 3 for low price leaders on food and beverage.
Yeah, that is surprising about Target. I agree. Before we get to some good news, John Pandal, one of our regulars, wrote, by 2050, and Jackson, I'm going to ask you to comment on this, by 2050, will a 30-year horizon for an environmental goal be acceptable to the segment of the market interested in such things? So bottom line, John saying, hey, 30 years from now, maybe 7-Eleven needs to accelerate. What do you think?
That's a very good point. 30 years, especially at this point, at 2020, that feels pretty far away. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of governments around the world have set 2050 as this is going to sound morbid, but for lack of a better term, the drop dead date right. For as sort of the deadline that we have to get this done by. So I in order to try to reverse the effects of climate change and try to recover some of the damage we do to our planet. So I think that 7-Eleven and what these governments are doing is setting that 2050 date as a, look, we just got to get this done by this point. And I'm sure they'll be working to reach their zero emission goal sooner than that. But it's just got to get done by then. Now, and while I say that, I also want to couch that in some, realism. We're still going to see gas powered cars on the road because they're still going to be around. Gasoline will still be sold by 2050. It's just that electric vehicles will be competitive with them at that point.
Got it. So with that, Jen, why don't you wrap us up with some good news?
Sure. Well, I love any organization or company that tries to increase children and their families' access to fresh fruits and vegetables. I think that's always a great cause. And United Fresh, obviously the produce organization, has just kicked off their season of giving, a month-long event, a series of events. They'll do social media, fun social media, virtual events, and their fundraising opportunities. And they're inviting the whole produce industry to get involved. So visit www.unitedfreshstart.org and find out how you can help and participate.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for joining us here on Winsight Live. And again, Christine, welcome. And for our viewers, don't forget our archives are there for all of our episodes that we've been doing since, I guess this is February or March when we started, and we're continuing to do it. So Winsight Grocery Business, Restaurant Business, CSP, Supermarket Guru, check us out. And we'll see you back here next Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific and 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a great week. Wear a mask. Oh, yeah. And no, Thanksgiving is this week or next week?
This week.
This week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. No turkey pillows.